everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and I am here with the studious Nikki Kinzer.
That's funny. Yes. Very studious. Especially with my glasses. I look so smart.
You do. You look like a librarian.
Yes.
We're talking about studying smarter. 5 tips for studying smarter this week. This is on the heels of our studying tools episode last week. If you haven't heard that, go back and listen to that. Get some good ideas for hardware and tools that you can use. Then come back and listen to this one to talk about the strategies for actually studying smarter, I think, right?
Right.
All right. So, but before we dig into that, you need to head over to takecontroladhd.com. You need to get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website or subscribe to our mailing list right there on the homepage. Get an email with the latest episode each week. Connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at Take Control ADHD and call us. You can leave us a voicemail at 503-664-4ADD. We'd love to hear from you. It's ADHD Awareness Month.
It is, and I want to talk about it, and you see that on my notes. That's why you said that. Did you know it was?
It's because I have an alert on my calendar. It says ADHD Awareness Month. No, I'm lying to you right now. I did see it in your notes. It says, don't forget to mention ADHD Awareness Month. And now I want to know what should I be aware of? Because I'm aware of it every day.
You're aware of everything. I just noticed my camera was still on. Did you see me?
Yes, I was watching you making notes. It was really funny to watch you say, ha ha. That's funny. And sort of laugh at my joke, because when I can see you, I can tell you're not really laughing at my jokes.
I was laughing at your jokes, but you probably also saw I was doing like 2 things at once.
Well,
I was
you
trying to copy and paste something, and then I was still listening to you. And...
Well, at least you weren't picking your nose or something really bad.
No, I know, right? That would have been bad. All right.
So
funny.
talk about ADHD
off,
Awareness Month.
You can't see me.
Right.
Okay, sorry. All right, yes. October is ADHD Awareness Month, and it's just something I wanted to mention very quickly. So for people who follow Chad and Ada and some of these ADD resources, if you have them on your Facebook, you're going to see a lot of this popping up in your feeds about ADHD Awareness Month. And it's just an opportunity like, any other month. I mean, I don't want you to just not be aware of ADHD only in October.
Because my goodness, I can't tell you how much I look forward to November. I don't have to be aware of it anymore.
You don't have to be aware. But it's just one of those things to help other people get more educated around it. And there's just lots of articles. And, I like a lot of different pages. And so I'm seeing stuff in my feed all the time about great tips and strategies and people's stories and things like that. So just want people to be aware of it. Certainly check out my Facebook and my Twitter and my blog this month as well, because I'll be sharing in that lots of information. And I think the key is that for you to look at it, read it, but then to share it and give it to loved ones and people that may benefit from understanding this a little bit better. So that's what it is.
I love it. And don't forget to subscribe to the blog. And I don't read your posts before you post them. And now that I subscribe to the blog, I read them in my email. And it turns out it's really great.
Oh, thank you.
I love getting my little Nikki emails from the blog.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that because, I really have put a focus on the blog in the last couple of months and hope to continue doing that going into next year.
You can really tell.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. So I'm glad that you picked up on that, and hopefully other people will too. And I always, like I've said before, I try to have at least one of the posts kind of theme or play off of our podcast. So, whatever we're talking about that week, you pretty much can guarantee I mean, you don't get your money back because it's free. So I do my best to at least have one post that week that has something to do with what we've already talked about or additional information.
Just say it's worth vastly more than you pay for it.
That's right.
It is an incredible value.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So studying smarter. Let's talk about studying smarter. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I have 5 different tips on, it's what it means, studying smarter, just being more efficient with your time and not being so frustrated at the end of a 2-hour period of time where you were supposed to be studying and maybe you didn't get as much done as you wanted to.
How did you study in college?
How?
Yeah, like what was if you were to describe your study habits, how would you describe them briefly?
I can tell you that like the first year of college was really difficult for me because I had a hard time taking notes. I was taking too many notes, or I was making too many, I was taking too many notes and too much detail. And so, I would get it written down and then I'd miss a portion of what the professor said because I was writing down what he said, 2 minutes ago. So it was like there was all these gaps all the time, right? Because I was always trying to catch up a little bit. And so one of the first things I learned very quickly is that I don't have to write every single thing down that the person is saying. And so I had to learn to adapt to that, okay, what's the most important key point here? Or what's the key point that I'm going to want to go back to because I don't understand it? But if I do understand it and I don't need to go back to it, don't write it down. And that's kind of, that was the first thing I learned. But I studied with people. I always studied with people. I mean, I guess because I always lived with people, if you were in the dorm, then we would study either in our rooms with other people or we would study in the living room area or, the common areas. I was in a sorority for 2 years, so I always studied with people when I lived in the sorority. And then my senior year, I lived with 4 girls in an apartment off campus. And so there were always people around me, which I think for whatever reason, it helped me stay focused if I wasn't by myself. I think like every student, I remember cramming a little bit and doing, not all nighters because I need sleep. I can't function even as a 20, or I guess I wasn't 20. Yeah, I was 20 when I was in college. Even as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, I couldn't have no sleep and then go to school the next day. Like I had to always sleep, but I would kind of manage my time of, okay, I'm going to study from 10 to 12 and then I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to get up at 6 and I'm going to study from 6 to 8 and then classes at 9. You know what I mean? Like I definitely scheduled when I was going to study and, what that was going to look like. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to reflect on how things have changed. And I was very much, it was very similar. I was very much a crammer and I wasn't very well organized. I really struggled with that. And so when I did study, I studied for really long stretches, usually right the night before something was due or some exam was going to happen or something. And so I would put, 4, 5, 6 hours late into the middle of the night and I would just pound giant tumblers full of Coke and coffee, and I would just engage so much caffeine and sugar into my system that would keep me awake. But when they talk about in psychology about state-dependent memory, that is a big deal. That I think really impacts you as a student. If you study, I am such a believer, if you study and you're jacked up on substances, then getting into the test and feeling refreshed and not having, any of those substances may help you not perform quite as well as you need to perform, whether you studied a lot or not. And so I think it's interesting as we're talking about studying smarter, a lot of these tips are things that we have learned over the years that the way you and I studied in college wasn't the best, most efficient way to study. And I had no system. Nobody ever taught me how to study.
Oh, right.
I was just flying completely blind. I made it up, and I thought if I just stare at my notes long enough, page after page, I'll get it. And I think it's interesting when you look back and think, gosh, I never had any sense of the way my physiology affected my psychology and my ability to study and focus. So anyway.
Well, and I just remember always getting to a point that, and it was always sometime in the night before a test. And so, it was probably getting into the wee hours, and I would just get to the point where, okay, you know what? If I don't know it now, I'm not going to know it.
Yes.
And so I would just sort of throw in the towel, okay, I'm done, because I can't, I just know I'm not going to get this. Even if I keep studying right now, it's not going to help. So I'm just done.
And what's interesting about that is you're probably right. You're probably right. But it's not because you're necessarily done. It's because you didn't have a good strategy leading up to that point.
Right.
And what's funny is I think we look at that feeling. I totally remember that feeling. I used to think of that, as the reward. Like that was the little dopamine rush, that little bit of liberation that said, okay, I'm finished. I can go relax my brain now. And really, and we'll talk about this in a moment, really, I should have been shooting for that little dopamine rush of release intermittently over the, preceding 3 or 4 days, in smaller doses. Anyway.
Yeah. And you know what? This is strange. I know I drank soda when I was there, when I was in college, but I never drank coffee. In fact, I never drank coffee until like later in life.
It was
kids.
Oh my goodness. It was just always on tap. Anytime, day or night, you could walk up and fill up your tumbler and because there was a soda machine always open to students.
Yeah.
24 hours a day in the study area.
Yeah.
It's awful. It was awful.
It is. It's crazy.
Okay.
All right.
First tip.
Well, actually, before I even go into the first tip, this was great timing because I had one of my clients ask a question. And so I'm going to start with that, I think, first. If that's okay.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of go into the tips and how the tips actually help her question too. She gets sleepy when she reads. And so, so her question was, any strategies, any thoughts? I read, I get tired, but I have no problem moving on to the next activity and then I'm fine. It's it's the reading that's making her tired. That physical activity of reading is making her tired. And I understand that. Believe me, I understand that. I read one page and I go to bed.
But I wonder, you're reading in bed, right?
Right. So, yeah. Or even in the car or whatever. I always get tired
while you're driving. You read a lot while you're driving.
And I text message.
And you text and listen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really a surprise.
It's amazing.
That
Yeah.
I'm still here.
It really, you're brave.
I know. I'm brave and stupid.
Brave and stupid.
No, that is not true, Pete Wright. But I do get physically tired when I'm reading. It's just something that happens. And so, and that's kind of what sounds to me like the same thing is happening to her. And so I wanted to just sort of, talk about the strategies that I gave to her about this sleeping thing. And then we can talk about these other strategies that, kind of cross over.
Oh, good. Yeah. All right.
So basically the first suggestion that I had for her was to only read for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. So instead of actually reading, and I know it's easy to do this because I did this and I'm sure you did too. I'm going to spend 2 hours reading this chapter, or I'm going to spend 2 hours reading for this class.
Disaster.
And it just doesn't set you up for success. So yes, it is going to take you longer doing it the way that I'm going to suggest. There's no doubt about it. It will take you longer. But the goal is that we hope that it will keep you not so frustrated and actually help you retain the information more. So I would say for 10 minutes, read as much as you can for 10 minutes and then stop and then take a break. Anybody can read for 10 minutes without falling asleep. Especially if you go into the intention of knowing you're only going to be reading for 10 minutes. You go into the intention thinking you're going to read for 60 and it changes the dynamics of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then you're thinking, well, I better get comfortable, and as soon as you start getting comfortable, then you start relaxing into sleep. I would. Can I add something to that, or do you want to finish your thought? I have an addition.
Yeah,
I think there is something really important that ties to this physiology piece. And if you're really studying, if you have a text, I will never forget. I had the most boring political science textbook. It was like Liberal Thought in America or something. It was just incredibly dense, and I couldn't make it through it. I would fall asleep no matter what. But I found if I stood up and moved to a different location, like I would read a passage, on a particular political thinker for 10 minutes, standing in the corner of a very strange room, where you would not normally stand and read, but you're standing in the corner and read for 10 minutes. And then the next time you then take a break. And then the next time you read, go to a different location. And what you're doing, your brain is associating. Yeah, it's associating the content you're reading with the location that you're standing. And so when it comes time to recall, you then can walk through the physical location where you were reading and find that triggers what you were reading.
That's a great idea.
It really is. It's a wonderful thing. And when I was in college, when I was a senior, I finally started getting good at this. I would do things like I would stand on a table and read for 5 minutes. And then when I'm taking an exam on that material, I think, okay, now what was I reading when I was standing on the table? Oh yeah, I remember that.
I have this image of you in your hoodie.
Yeah. Yes. Big
standing
hoodie
on
fan.
tables, going in the corner, and everybody's like, "What's that strange guy doing over there reading his textbook?"
Yeah. But the real trick is
great idea.
is standing up and associating movement with reading, because then you're conditioning yourself. Right now, most of us, I think, are conditioned when we read. When we hear read, we read at bedtime, or we read to relax, or we read. That's not what you want to do. You really want to engage, and engaging means getting physical with the material. I really believe that.
Well, and and actually that ties into what I told her next to do. A couple things. One is not to lay in your bed and read.
Don't do
that. Don't lay on the couch or sit in a really comfortable chair. If you know that especially if the material is not interesting to you and it's going to be difficult getting through, sit at a desk. Sit at the table, do what Pete's what you're recommending, move around into different areas. And I also recommend the standing the portion of it too. Yeah. Stand and pace back and forth, highlight as you're reading, because all of this stuff makes it more active for you. Right. And like what you're saying, you retain it and you remember where you were, but it just, it also helps you not be tired. If you're standing up, pacing back and forth, you're not going to be falling asleep, versus if you're like laying in bed trying to read this, you're going to fall asleep.
Absolutely.
And drink water.
Yes.
I think hydration is really important. Not soda, not coffee. Don't do what Pete Wright does.
Don't. Let my life serve as a warning to others.
Drink water, please.
Yes.
Yeah. And then my last suggestion for her, which is also going to go into what I'm going to talk about here in just a couple minutes, is to do the reading piece when she has the most energy. So if she is most energetic in the evening or afternoon, then let that be the time where she reads, and let the writing work and the other busier work be at the times where she's really tired. So we want to kind of match that energy level with the task that is a little bit more difficult to do, or makes you sleepy. Midday, or this particular client works out in the morning, and so maybe she does some reading right after she worked out. Maybe get that first 10 minutes in right after she's done exercising, and see if that makes a difference. So that's what I have for that. If you're starting to get kind of tired, reading those textbooks they're dense. They're awful
so
sometimes.
Dense. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So finding the right place to study is my first tap. Your first tap?
Are you tapping?
That's weird. I put like study and steps together and got tap.
First tap.
Okay. So anyway, finding the right place to study. Did you go to the library a lot when you studied?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. I did sometimes. And I think that for people, it just depends. And this is what you want to play around with a little bit, especially if you're new to school, or you have taken a long break from school and you're going back. You may not know where the right place to study for you is yet. So we want to kind of play around with that. It could be the library. It could be a coffee shop. It could be completely by yourself, in a room with doors around it. And nobody can get in. I don't know what that looks like for you. But that is what you got to find out. What is the best place for you, where you're going to have the least amount of distractions, where you can be the most productive, get the most done, and is convenient for you. Because even if the library may be the best place for you to study, then figure out how to work that into your schedule so it's convenient. You don't want to be sitting in your dorm room when that's an hour away, or not an hour away, but a mile away that you have to walk to. And, it's 9:00 at night. You're not going to do that. So maybe if you went to the library earlier in the day, in between classes, you would have gotten more done. You know what I mean?
Sure,
you just want to think things through a little bit more.
Well, and I think we have so many great tools to understand ourselves and our schedules, and track to track how busy we are and keep track of the openings in our own schedules than we did, when you and I were first doing this. And so I'm seeing more of my students that are generally just more organized in terms of their time. And it may be because their systems are stretched, because they are, maybe they're working more, they are, juggling families, they're doing things because they're, I'm seeing more and more non-traditional students coming through the classroom. And I think they're just wiser about that. But I think that's really one of the most important things, is understand yourself and your own time, and watch for those windows when you can match studying what content works best for these little windows of time that will crop up. I think that's a really important skill and muscle.
Yeah. Well, and then the second tip is what we've already talked about, and that is doing that hard stuff when you're feeling more energized. So again, it ties into that time management, looking at those gaps in your schedule where, okay, this would be a really good time for me to tackle this book for 10 or 15 minutes. So scheduling study time at your peak. When do you feel your best? When do you feel most energized? And if you can, if you're not in class or working, study schedule your study sessions during those times. And it's also easier to push through those subjects that are boring but we have to take to make sure that we do it during the times that we feel the best. So
absolutely.
Taking breaks is my third tip. I keep wanting to say tape or tip. I don't tip.
It's a tip. It's a tip. It's a suggestion.
I know. Crazy. I'm tongue tied. Taking breaks, Pete, is important, right?
This is the biggest one, the biggest lesson. Like this right here is why I would be such a fantastic student today.
Right.
If I could only do it again.
I know. I totally feel you, because I would say that out of all of these tips, this is probably the one that I really did poorly at.
Yeah. Yes.
Because I would schedule that time like, okay, I'm 6 to 10. I just remember always thinking in hours, 6 to 10, I'm going to study for this class. And then from 10 to 12, I'm going to study from this class, and whatever it was always this, these big, huge chunks of time. And, I don't remember taking breaks. Maybe I did, but I really don't remember taking many breaks.
I'm with you. It certainly was not a seminal part of my study experience.
No. And that is why, I think for this particular subject, studying smarter, we want to take those breaks. We want to study for 30 minutes. We want to then take a 10-minute break. This is going to help you stay focused. It's going to help you with your energy. A great thing to do on your break is to walk around, get some exercise, stretch a little bit, get some water. What we want to avoid is checking Facebook, checking your email, calling a friend. We really do want to stay away from the rabbit holes that could take you away from going back to the study period.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you want to stay away from that stuff, but, and you can certainly play around with the time frame. I'm saying 30 minutes now. But if you find a class that you love and maybe it's a little bit longer than 30 minutes, but the point is don't go longer than an hour, don't you think?
I wouldn't touch an hour. I was going to say 30 minutes is sort of at the long
max.
end. Yeah. That's where these things like the Pomodoro technique works so well, because it's an odd time. And we've talked about the Pomodoro technique in the past on the show, but it's, and you can search for it in our archives or look for Pomodoro technique on the web. It allows you to think in terms of these little blocks and of 25 minutes and then your break, and because it's kind of an odd time, it plays with your general expectation of time slots of a half hour and an hour. It actually helps you, I think, move through more material faster. We think of, and I've often said this, the college experience, higher ed in general, is a marathon, not a sprint. But when it comes to studying, you want to think in terms of sprints. Little blocks of time, work really hard, high energy for 15 minutes, for 24 minutes, and then rest. Then take a break. That's how you're going to build the studying muscle. It's how you're going to keep your brain engaged. It's how you're going to keep the material in your head where it counts. Right.
Absolutely. Very good. We've already talked about this, but I'm going to say it again because it's my point number 4 is staying active while studying. So, it's that standing up, walking around, pacing back and forth, using a highlighter. I also find that a lot of my students do really well with handwriting notes. So they're reading a chapter and then they handwrite the notes that they're getting off of that chapter. They may not need the notes for anything else, but just that simple fact that I'm reading it and now I'm taking my hand to this pen and then I'm putting the pen on the paper and putting what I just read onto this piece of paper. There's this connection there that is like magical for some students. And so, again, that's what that's doing for you, right? Is keeping that studying active.
Yeah. I will embrace and extend that. And I know I've mentioned this on the show before too. I have, over the last, I guess, year and a half, 2 years maybe, been really enamored by Mike Rowe's sketch notes. And he has done so much to teach people how to be really, really active note takers and to draw their notes, to draw the images, to change the way you look at words and turn them into little pictures and icons and symbols that'll help you remember them. And so heading up to, I'll put a link for Sketchnotes. He has a book, the Sketchnote Workbook and the Sketchnote Handbook, that teach you how to draw simple shapes that will help you really engage these different areas of your brain as you take notes. It's enormously helpful for me, and I just love it. So,
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And that'll be in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes.
Okay. Now, my last tip, I did really great at. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. I always had study partners, and I recommend this for folks with ADHD is have a partner. And we've talked about body doubling before in the past with organizing, and it's the same thing as, or it's the same kind of concept with studying. Is that just having somebody in the room with you who's also studying or who's in your class with you who can, again, actively study with you. You guys are talking about the information. You're going over questions, and they may know something you don't, you know something they don't. All of that stuff is so good, and so having somebody to kind of go and study with and practice these things with are really, it's going to help you, especially if you're a verbal processor. Being able to talk this information out to somebody is really helpful.
Absolutely agree with that.
And yeah, I did that.
Don't find people that are going to distract you.
Well,
that was my mistake. And study with friends.
Exactly. I mean, you certainly want to be serious about it, and depending on how close you are with the person, which I'm assuming if you're studying with them, you're friends. Don't be ashamed or feel bad by telling them, hey, I got to make sure my ADHD doesn't get in the way today because I got to really focus on this. So help me do that if you can.
Mm-hmm.
If you notice I'm wandering or I'm not paying attention, ask me. What are you doing? Are you focusing? Do you need something? And have them be a partner with you. And I think that you might find that to be really beneficial.
Absolutely agree.
Okay. So the very last thing I want to just say is that, school has started. We are definitely into fall. It's cold. It's getting colder. And I know that a couple shows back, I was talking about how it's really helpful if you're going to hire a coach for you to talk to me before you start school. But it's never too late to hire a coach, and never, ever, ever too late. So even if you start getting into the term and you're thinking, okay, man, it would be really nice to have a partner here with me, a coach with me to help me with this stuff. Check out my website, check out the services for college students. Because I take college students throughout the whole year, not just in August or September. So.
That is a great suggestion. Subscribe to the podcast and the blog if you're listening to this on the website. Make sure you start getting a taste of these resources that Nikki puts out every week, and get an idea for the kinds of stuff you can learn. It is so valuable to have the one-on-one relationship.
Absolutely. Huge. And next week in the blog, I felt like that was an advertisement. And next week, I'm going to have tips on how to prepare for the big tests, exams, whether that's a final, midterm, whatever. But some different tips on how to prepare for those will be in the blog this week.
Excellent. And probably maybe just going into the first round of early tests, big tests and quizzes, midterms, things like that. That'll be good. Good timing.
It will be. Yep.
All right. I think that's it. I think we're done. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening and downloading and subscribing to the show. We appreciate your time and attention, especially your attention. If you haven't done so, we deeply appreciate those of you who head over to iTunes and click on the show, look for the show there, and click on reviews and leave us a 5-star review. It really is the best way to ensure that other people will be able to find the show when they are seeking out ADHD support. So please help others, help us. We appreciate it very, very deeply. Thanks so much, everybody. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next week on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.